I don't have to
Okay, now you go.
I don't have to push it. Push it real good. No. Okay. Okay, we're good. Can I get started? Yeah.
Go for it.
I managed.
Hey, did you introduce yourself?
No.
Introduce who you are? Okay.
Who am I today? I'll be whoever. I'm Brooke. So I'm sure you guys are all getting kind of tired of seeing my face. This is the last time you'll have to see my face for a while, I think. Well, unless you come for a second time because this is so entertaining. Because I'll be back in, I think, January. Yes, at really great. So I'm from the Hutchinson Clinic. I do wellness programming for the Hutchinson Clinic. And then I also, kind of as a side gig, I'm a huge nerd about stress. Learning about stress, helping people manage stress. I do it a lot. I integrate it a lot into the wellness programming that I do for other businesses with the clinic. And then I also write about it, do research about it. I'm working right now on trying to get some research published on the topic of self-regulation and managing stress. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I think it's kind of the golden thread that it wraps around everything. If you talk to a lot of people about their physical health, you talk to people about their mental health, you talk to people really about anything, and there's this kind of common denominator of stress. So it's something that I have found it impacts leadership, it impacts our ability to relate to other people. I think it really impacts our personalities. So poorly managed stress can sometimes make it look like maybe we're not as nice of a person as we want to be, or maybe it speaks volumes about how come we say and do the things that we do. So I think it's really important to learn ways to combat stress and understand why stress happens and where it comes from. And learn a little bit more about self-care, because that's the most important part of this. I think you guys are doing a self-care challenge right now. Is it going on right now? Okay, so maybe that's something that's new to you guys. Maybe that's something that you've already been participating in, is making it a point to take care of yourselves. I hope that's the case. But if it's not, we're going to talk a little bit about some ways to do that as well. So for those of you guys who have heard me speak like 100 times about stress, some of this will be old information, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again. And for those of you guys that this is new information, I'm going to breeze through it kind of quickly, but if you have questions at the end or you want to email me about anything, please feel free to do so. We want to talk a little bit first about what is stress, or maybe what is not stress would be an easier way to describe that. We all know what stress is. Stress is a natural part of life. We all experience stress. Maybe some of you are feeling stress just being here. Maybe you have somewhere else you need to be. Maybe you've had a rough work day and you're feeling stressed. Maybe you just spent a little bit of time in that parking lot. That was me. I'm feeling some stress. I didn't understand this process of like passing the cars, driving in the wrong lane. I think someone gave me a finger. I don't think it was a good finger either. But it's okay. I'm learning. I know how to do Union Valley, but this one was new to me. But it's okay. It's all right. But stress comes in all kinds of ways. It motivates us to do things. Some stress is good stress. The person who was really angry at me motivated me to pay attention to where I was going and what I was doing and what was happening in my surroundings, so that I didn't wind up in either a fist fight or an accident in the parking lot. Stress is what motivates us to do other things. Why are you guys here today? Not because you love me, not because you love to hear about stress, but probably because you want to achieve something. You might be stressed about not achieving something. It's what motivates us to get things done, deadlines. Really anything we do is motivated by a fear of stress or, something else going on. So stress has a really good role in our lives. The problem is when we have too much stress, when we have mismanaged stress, when we have stress that's in excess. That's where things become problematic, and that's where we can experience some physical and mental symptoms of stress. Okay, so what are stressors? We have things like school, we have things like work, we have family, relationships, finances, environment, laundry. That's a big stress at my house. I don't know why. My kids never have pants. Like, where are their pants? I don't understand. It's like you only have shorts and it's winter. I don't get it. But the whole fact of the matter is should we and can we avoid all of these things? Can we avoid work stress? Can we avoid school stress? Can we avoid financial stress? Yeah, with some regard we can. We can make life choices that make these things a little bit easier. But in my research and in all of my time talking to people and working with people, it's not really about avoiding the stress. It's about managing our responses to the stress. Something that's probably familiar to you guys, we, sometimes in education talk about triggers, and we talk about those sorts of things. And I'm sort of unique in my theories about those. I could follow you around, and I could remove the triggers, and I could remove all of the stressors, but they're different all the time, and that's not very realistic. So I would much rather teach a person how to manage difficult situations than to teach them how to avoid difficult situations, because we can't do this. It's not realistic. I had to come here today. So as stressful as your parking lot is to me, I had to figure out a way to get here. So I could get here, and I could have walked in, and I could have been like sweaty and angry and like maybe a little disheveled, or I could have thought, okay, I don't know how to do this parking lot. I have no idea what's going on here, but I'm going to figure this out, and I'm not going to let it overcome me. Now, I joke about the parking lot, but we have a lot of situations in our life that are much like the parking lot. It's all about perception, and I could have let that parking lot get me, but darn it, I was not going to. Much like I wasn't going to let all of the other stressors that came up today get me. So that's where I think it's important that we understand how to combat some of those things. Okay, so we know that stress comes with it lots of negative outcomes. We know that it can have physical symptoms. So you may talk to people who have chronic pain, feeling like they just feel unwell, but they can't put a finger on it. They aren't sleeping well. Their immune system is poor. Maybe you know somebody who has temporomandibular joint syndrome, that's TMJ, in the jaw. Now, that's not to say that stress is what causes all of this, but oftentimes there can be kind of this underlying factor of stress that can lead to some of these symptoms. Aches and pains, increased risk for certain diseases and conditions, which can be kind of interesting. Oftentimes, it's the stress that leads to these things like high blood pressure, but it's also our poor coping with stress that can lead to some of those things. So sometimes when we are stressed, we may overeat. Some folks turn to drug use, alcohol use, smoking. Lots of different poor coping skills can lead to the risk for certain diseases. We have hair loss, heart palpitations, high blood pressure, lots of things. So nowhere in here is it unicorns, rainbows, any of those good things. So stress doesn't really bring us anything. A little bit of stress is motivating, but I'm talking more about like chronic stress. And those are just the physical symptoms, but there are also obviously psychological symptoms that come along with poorly managed stress. So you may find yourself having difficulty concentrating, mood changes, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, suicidal thoughts. That's extreme, but it's definitely something worth talking about. Mood swings and mood changes are both on here, obviously very important. And unhealthy coping strategies. That applies both physically and mentally. These are just, it just kind of can wrap its arms around us and take over. I think it was in one of my presentations I did here, I was talking about, I encounter someone at the grocery store who is rude and who's just being a jerk. I want to believe that that person wasn't born that way, that there is some kind of stressor in their life that got them where they are. I spent about 10 years working in mental health, and, I would talk to a person, I worked a lot with children, and I would see this person, I would see their behaviors, I would see their actions, and I would think, God, you just kind of seem a little bit awful right now. But when I got to know them more and I got to know their circumstances, it really, the more you know about stress and how people respond to it, I really think it helps with empathy. Because when you hear like what a person's got going on in their personal life, it really speaks volumes about how they act and what they do. So I always try to take that into consideration when I encounter someone who is rude, is that perhaps their stress is poorly managed and that they don't know what to do with all the feels, for lack of a better description, because it can be very stressful. Life is very stressful. So if we don't know how to manage it, then what are we doing with that? Nobody takes like 5 minutes to teach how to be stressed. We teach you how not to be stressed, but like what do we do when we are? We can shove it and we can try to stuff it away, but it isn't going anywhere. We feel a lot of feelings of frustration and anger, but nobody ever taught us how to be angry, like to teach us how to be not angry. But like it's okay to be mad and frustrated and stressed, but how do you do that, and how do you do that effectively? Some people don't learn, and so they throw chairs, or they act out aggressively, and then other people have those skills and they don't do that. But without proper training. We're all just left to do whatever we see someone else do. I think a lot about, especially young children who have poorly managed big feelings, and they're no different than adults with poorly managed big feelings. We only know what we've been taught. So that's why I think this is so important, and I'm so excited that the school thinks it's important enough for you guys to hear about that and take that on as one of your topics. Okay, some of you guys have heard me talk about the backpack. When I think about stress, it all fits in a backpack. We're all wearing a backpack. Thank you. I was wondering, I'm like a loud talker, but I don't know if I'm that loud of a talker. Okay, so we're all wearing a backpack. We all have one on. We were born with one. You don't get to take it off. There are a lot of things in our backpacks. We have very important things in our backpacks, like raising children, paying bills, coming to work, getting dressed in the morning. I mean, that can be stressful, I suppose, if you have to like iron, do all this stuff. We have our everyday things that go in our backpack. Those things have to be there. Maybe we're caring for aging parents. Those are all things that live in our backpack, and they weigh us down. But they're there, and they may be temporary, they may be permanent, but they're there. Then we have stuff in our backpack that's extra. These are the things that we put in our backpack by our own choice. So these are the things like, hey, can you help me move this weekend? And your mind is saying no, but your mouth is saying yes, because you have this fear, this stress about what happens if I say no. What will they think of me? So we, unfortunately, put a lot of things in our backpack that don't belong there. Now, we need to leave room for the things that we have to keep in there, but how much weight are we carrying in stress of things that we've put in our backpack on our own? Remember when Richard Simmons was missing? That's when I made this. That's why that's on there. He's no longer missing, so he's not probably in your backpack. Another thing that I think is important to point out is that how are you defining success? How many of you think that success is defined by how much stress you have? When we run into maybe other people at the grocery store, or we're having coffee with a friend and they say, how are things going in your life? How often do we say, you know what, I've got it all together. Work's pretty easy. I just kind of show up and collect a paycheck. My kids are pretty much on autopilot. My to-do list is small. I've got everything under control. We don't ever say that. We have a tendency to point out all the things we've got going on, how many places we're supposed to be in one time, how late we stayed up working on cupcakes for school, how many times we had to redo this presentation because we wanted it to be perfect. Those are the things we talk about because, unfortunately, as a society, that's how we define success, is by how stressed we are. If you ran into this person I spoke of earlier who really didn't have a whole lot going on, you might think, well, gosh, what's up with her? We just don't talk like that. It's not what we do. And even if it is the case, even if you feel like everything's coasting along, you might have a tendency to, throw something in there just to make it interesting, because interesting and success are kind of defined by how stressed we are. So I think it's important that we consider those things when we think about what's going in our backpack, is what are we putting in there on our own, because it helps us to feel successful. Okay, so stress impacts everything. I think you've probably gotten that. It impacts us physically, so we have symptoms in our body. It impacts us cognitively, so it changes our thoughts. When we're feeling really, really stressed, our thoughts tend to change, and we tend to have more negative thoughts. When things feel really overwhelming, it's that sky is falling mentality, to where one little thing that's actually not a big deal, like a parking lot chaos, really send you over the edge. It's because your thoughts are changing as a result of your stress. It changes your feelings. You may notice you're quicker to become angry. You're quicker to become tearful. Some people respond, in kind of an opposite way. We call that mania, where they, seem really overly happy. That can be a stress response. And then it changes how we do things. It changes our behaviors. If we approach stressful situations and we have chronic stress and it's poorly managed, we may say or do things and act differently than we would normally do if we weren't experiencing extreme stress. Okay, I could spend hours and hours. This is the foundation of all of my research. I get really excited and nerded out talking about it, but I will keep it very, very short today. When we are experiencing stress, we are experiencing fight or flight. Anytime you're experiencing chronic stress, your brainstem is taking over. If you've ever noticed when you're experiencing chronic stress, your heart may be racing. You may feel like your senses are kind of heightened. That's that fight or flight response. You may notice all of the same things you would notice if you were trying to kind of flee from a predator. It's that old system in our brain. We can't distinguish between what's an actual physical threat and what's just perceived threat. What's the threat of, I'm going to miss a deadline? That's very, very stressful, especially if it's something important. And you may notice those same things, the stomach upset, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, the increased respiration. All of those same symptoms occur when we're feeling extreme stress. So it's something to make note of. And if you're noticing any of those feelings in your body, that's like your body saying, hey, over here, pay attention to me. I'm struggling. You need to do something to combat this stress so that we don't go into full-blown fight or flight. Because we know when we're in full-blown fight or flight, our brainstem is completely in charge, and the good thinking part of our brain is completely disengaged because all we're trying to do is survive. We're in the survival part of our brain, so we can't do any of the good stuff. And we need the good stuff to make the good decisions. Have you ever been so stressed that you forgot an important, am I the only one who's ever lost track of time and I didn't really forget to pick up my kids from daycare, but you got all this stress. The important things aren't in the front. That's not where you're at. You can't focus on, maybe you turn the oven on and you forgot about it. It makes you sound like an irresponsible parent, right? That's what I'm up here just saying. No, but when you're feeling stressed, the things that are important, the things that you need access to this part of your brain for, it's disconnected because all you're trying to do is survive. Maybe you blew off a doctor's appointment that you knew you had, but you forgot. That's because the part of our brain that helps us remember those things is completely disengaged because all we're focusing on is survival. And that's why that's the foundation of why we have so many health problems as a result of stress, is because all that cortisol, all that adrenaline is being dumped in our body, and there's no bear chasing you. But our brains think that. It just wants to survive. So all that's floating around in our bodies, and there's nowhere for it to go. So that's really where all of that comes from. And that's why it's so important to disengage that brainstem. It also impacts how we feel. When you're feeling stressed, you notice you may be more emotional. You really want to make note of, I told you to pay attention to the feelings in your body, but also make note of any extreme thinking. So if you think about, God, this happens to me all the time, or I'm never going to get everything done. Those are those extreme words. And if you start thinking those extreme words, that's a good indicator that you're feeling extreme stress and you need to do something to combat it. I could spend hours on this too, but remember that nothing can make you feel a certain way. And I can battle with people for days about this. Some situations warrant certain feelings, but you get to choose those feelings. So that parking lot, I could have chosen angry, I could have chosen sad, I could have chosen anxious, because that's a feeling you might feel in those situations. But, and that would be a completely realistic feeling to have, but I got to choose how extreme it was. I could have been really, really mad, but I chose not to be. I just decided I'm here, I'm present, this is the situation I'm in, and this is how I'm going to deal with it. But I got to be in charge of how intense that feeling was. So here's how we're going to combat those things. This is the self-care that we're going to talk about. I oftentimes run into people who don't know enough about stress, who will just look at a person who's willing to say, I'm feeling so much stress, and they'll go, just calm down. Well, if it was only just that easy. It doesn't work that way. Because if it worked that way, well, then we'd just not do a lot of things that we do that are unhealthy. But it takes a little bit more than that. So it takes a little bit of awareness about stress. Like I mentioned earlier, quit glorifying busy, stress, and chaos. That does not define us as successful. Learning to say no and setting boundaries, that's really important. I think that's really hard as a parent. I think it's hard as a working parent to say no and set boundaries. Our time is very protected, and oftentimes, especially, when we're getting hit with on social media and, face-to-face and by email, all of these requests day in and day out. Can you do this? Will you attend this party? Will you make this? It's very easy for folks to reach out and ask for things, and it's sometimes hard to be able to say no. You know what? I can't do that. That is not on my list for today. I think it's important to limit time on social media. We can kind of get sucked into that, and I'm as guilty as anyone. But I think for a lot of reasons, because our time is protected, because sometimes it can lead us to think you have to remember that what people put on social media is only what you want them to see, what they want you to see. Let me say it in the correct way. What they want you to see. So nobody's putting out, all of the things that are going wrong in their life. They're only putting the things that are, well, some people, let's be honest. Some people really do, because they're really searching for a lot of feedback. But you can kind of get sucked into that too. So I think it's really important to be mindful of that. And perception is the most important thing. The way we think about something impacts how we feel about it. So if you look at a situation like it's terrible, guess what it's going to be? It's going to be terrible, because that's the way we perceive it. Our brains are so powerful. That's why it's important to practice self-care. It's not selfish. You have to take time for yourself. Okay, this is important. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Brené Brown. I love Brené Brown. If you want some really great reads, I can tell you all of her books are wonderful. But she talks a lot about connecting the thinking and the doing in all areas. What we think about and what we do are sometimes two different things. If we can connect those things and actually do what we think about and do our values, then that can be really powerful. For one, we can knock something off of our to-do list. Here's her quote, and I really love it. I value mindfulness, breathing, and the mind-body-spirit connection. I even have yoga outfits. Here's what she means by that. Her values include things like mindfulness, breathing, and the mind-body-spirit connection, but she doesn't practice any of it. So she's kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, I even have yoga outfits. You can dress the part. You can say, I want to be stress-free. You can say, I want to practice self-care. You can say, I want to do all of these things. But the actual doing of it is a whole nother story. So it's connecting the dots. We all know it's important to practice self-care. We know it's important to manage our stress. We know it's important to, eat healthy, exercise, do all of those things. But it's a whole nother thing to actually stand up and do it. So that's sort of that. I think that's the big takeaway from today. If you remember nothing else, please just remember this. It's the connecting the thinking and the knowing and the doing. You can kind of lead the horse to the water, and then it's just standing there in its yoga clothes, right? Because it's not going to actually do it. So it's important to connect those two. Okay, so I think the first thing when I talk about self-care, the most important part, taking time for hobbies. Even if it's Netflix, I don't care what you do that you like. Whatever it is, it's got to be for you. It's got to be what you like. Sit down, take that time for yourself. Whatever you enjoy, and not what you think someone thinks you should enjoy. If you don't enjoy yoga, don't do yoga. If you don't enjoy cross-stitching, don't do whatever it is. You do what you like, and it doesn't matter if it's sitting on the couch for a few hours and binging on some Netflix. Take time for friends. Schedule that time, or don't. If you don't like people and you spend all day pretending you do, that's okay. Take that time. I know there are some introverts in this room who really probably would just enjoy some alone time. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Go with it. Spend the time. Now, if you haven't left your house in like a week and you haven't showered, that's a different problem. But if you want to spend an evening at home alone and someone says, just come out with us, you'll feel so much better. You tell them no. No, I won't. I know what makes me feel good, and it's staying home by myself. And that's okay. You do what works for you. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is a concept that's huge, and it could take a long time to talk about. I think we oftentimes assume mindfulness is just meditation. Mindfulness it's not something you do. It's a practice that becomes you. I am trained in mindfulness. I don't think I do a very good job of it. I think there's a lot of us who could stand to benefit from being present in the moment. I'm a planner. I'm an organizer. I move 100 miles an hour. That's why mindfulness is so important to me, because it involves being present in the moment. Right now, I can see the clock, and I've got about 4 minutes left, and I'm thinking about, okay, so first of all, how am I going to get out of this parking lot? Is it going to look the same when I leave as it did when I got here?
It'll be a lot better.
Sweet. Mark that off the list. But I'm already thinking ahead. That's how I know I'm not so great at my mindfulness practice, even though I'm trained in it. I'm constantly thinking ahead. I'm also thinking about, did I really swear on this thing? No, I'm kidding. I know I didn't. But I'm thinking about what already happened. I'm assessing, did I mess up when I was speaking? Did I not speak long enough? Did I forget something? We are constantly thinking about the history of what we've done and the future of what we're going to do. But what about right now? I'm standing up here talking to you guys right now, but I struggle with being in the moment. So that's why mindfulness is so much more than meditation. That's a great way to just to bring yourself into focus, to focus on the breath, to be in the moment. But that's only the tip of the mindfulness iceberg. I like this little acronym, SNACK. It's a mindfulness practice. So you want to stop, notice, accept, have a curiosity, and respond with kindness. So we enter situations assuming we know what's going to happen. My husband calls me and says, Brooke, I'm working late. I'm thinking, yeah, right, you are. Last time you told me you were working late, that wasn't the case. Whatever. I approach that situation assuming I know what's going to happen. Assuming he says he's going to be home at 7. Oh, I know it's going to be 8:30. But we approach situations like that, assuming we know because it's happened before. But with mindfulness, you approach situations without judgment, without assuming you know. Somebody approaches you who's generally kind of grouchy. Well, next time they approach you, you assume they're going to be grouchy. But maybe that's not the case. So mindfulness helps bring us into the moment, that we're going to approach that situation non-judgmentally and not assuming we know what that's going to be like. Mindfulness also helps change our thoughts, because our thoughts are not facts. So we can assess our thoughts of, is it true? Often the answer is yes. The thought is true, but is it absolutely true? Do I absolutely know what time this person is going to come? I don't, but I just assume I do. How does this thought make me feel? Well, first of all, nothing can make me feel any kind of way. I choose that feeling. But sometimes if I approach a situation that I've approached before and I assume I know what's going to happen, guess what I assume also? That those same feelings are going to be there. So I may get angry before anything ever happens because I think I know what's already going to happen. And what would things be like if I didn't hold this belief? How would I approach this situation with, let's say, my spouse, if I didn't assume I knew what he was going to do or what he was going to say? So I think mindfulness is such a broader concept. We think about meditation, but we forget all of these other really great parts. Now, that's not to say that, of course, sometimes past behaviors predict future behaviors, but we can't assume every situation is going to be the same, because all it does is trigger those same emotions, which can cause us so much stress. Exercise and yoga. It's important to add exercise. That's a really critical part of self-care. A lot of times people ask me, they say, I don't have time. Well, so when you're busy, anybody in here been busy? Were you busy yesterday? Oh, yeah? All of you shower in the last 24 hours? All of you brush your teeth sometime? Today, hopefully? Yeah? Why are those things not negotiable? We are never too busy for showers. We're never too busy to brush our teeth. But gosh darn, we're always too busy to exercise. Well, I shouldn't say always, but oftentimes. That's the first thing to go on the list when we're busy. Why is that? Why are we not scratching off showers? Because for some reason, that's become not negotiable. But taking care of ourselves physically is somehow negotiable. It's the first thing to go off the list. That is not logical. We could actually live longer without showers than we could without good, caring for our bodies. We'll live a whole lot longer if we skipped a shower, I guess, every other day. Now, our colleagues might not like us so much, depending on how hard you exercise. But I think that's important to think about. It's all in how we perceive it. How important is it to you? And if you remember what we've talked about, if you've listened to me speak before about stress, that when we're in that brainstem, the best cure for that is things that are patterned, rhythmic, repetitive. And exercise is all of those things. Guided imagery, for anybody who's interested, there's like 1,000 YouTube videos. I'm going to hypnotize you right now. You can just focus on some kind of image, deep breathing. It can help reset you. This is great self-care practice, 5 minutes a day in the morning before you start your busy day, to be proactive against the stress of the day. They also have YouTube videos of you're walking down a warm, sandy beach. Why do I get this weird accent when I do that? I don't know. They are. A lot of them are British. But it'll walk you through. It's just a quick way to reset your brain, help you prepare for the day. You can do it in response to stress, but I also like to see it done proactively against the stress. And then last but not least, clean out your dang backpack. Get the stuff out of there that doesn't need to be in there. Say no. turn off the, if somebody's hitting you up on social media to go here and there or participate in this party or whatever, don't do it. Just say no. Clean out your backpack. I think that's going to be the best way to combat the stress is what are you really in charge of and what can you do to lessen the weight of that stress. Okay, that's it. I went like 2 minutes over. I'm sorry. Now I'm stressed about it. I'm not at all. You guys have questions?